For the past 7 or 8 years, I've had almost no problems with hornworms, and I grow a lot of tomatoes. Every year I also grow a lot of basil around my tomato plants, and I've sworn by that combination for years. I like basil as a companion plant for tomatoes for a lot of reasons, but one of the big ones is that I just haven't had a hornworm problem until this year. This year, my basil got off to a really slow start. It was planted, but it wasn't big. It wasn't filling in around my tomatoes as soon as it normally does. And then all of a sudden, I got absolutely hammered with hornworms. Not one, not two. I started finding them all over these plants. And the crazy thing is, I did find some of them during the day and I picked them off. And I thought I was making progress. And then I went back outside with a blacklight flashlight, which we'll talk about in a minute, and I could not believe how many more were out there. So today I want to show you exactly what happened, how to recognize hornworm damage before you ever see the worm, the ridiculously easy flashlight trick that helped me find the ones I was missing, and what I did to get the infestation under control. And we're also going to talk about basil, because after 7 years of almost no hornworms and then suddenly getting hammered the 1 year my basil was late, I definitely noticed that. Now, can I prove that basil was the reason? No, this wasn't a scientific experiment, but I can tell you exactly what happened in my garden, and I can tell you what I'm going to do next year. But first, let me show you the clue that told me something was seriously wrong. The first thing I started noticing was missing foliage. And I'm not talking about the little holes you might see from flea beetles or some other tiny insect. Hornworms are big caterpillars, and they eat like big caterpillars. You can come outside and see a branch that looked perfectly normal a day or two ago, and suddenly you've got bare stems. This is the kind of damage I'm talking about. Leaves are just gone. And if you don't catch them, they'll continue working their way through the plant. They can also chew on the fruit. So if you're walking through your tomatoes and you're seeing this kind of sudden, dramatic defoliation, hornworms should be pretty high on your list. Now here's the frustrating part. Once you see the damage, you start looking for the thing that's doing it, and you can't find it because a hornworm on a tomato plant is almost comically well camouflaged. It's this giant caterpillar, sometimes practically the size of your finger or bigger, and yet somehow you can stare directly at it and not see it. But here's the other clue. Look for hornworm poop. The technical term is frass, but let's call it what it is. It's poop. And because hornworms can get so large, their poop gets pretty large too. You'll see these dark green or brownish pellets on the leaves, stems, or on the ground underneath the plant. And if you find a bunch of it in one area, don't just keep randomly scanning the entire tomato plant. Look at the stems and leaves directly above where you're finding the droppings. There's a good chance that the hornworm is somewhere in that area. And that's exactly what I started doing. I would find fresh damage, I would look for the frass, and then I'd slowly start working my way around the plant. Check along the stems, look inside the plant. And once I started doing that, I did find hornworms. And I just started picking them off, which, by the way, if you only have a few tomato plants and a few hornworms, it may be all you need to do. These aren't aphids where you've got 500 insects covering a plant. A handful of hornworms can do a shocking amount of damage, so if you can find them, hand picking is incredibly effective. I found some, and I removed them, and I thought, okay, I've got this. Except I didn't. This is where things got interesting. I knew about using a UV or blacklight flashlight to find hornworms, so I came back out after dark. And I had already picked hornworms off these plants during the day, right? I couldn't believe how many I had missed. Under a UV blacklight, hornworms glow. So instead of looking for a green caterpillar against green leaves and green stems, suddenly they stand out. And this was the moment I realized I had a much bigger hornworm problem than I thought I did. I had been walking right past them. Some of them were tucked into the foliage, some were underneath leaves, some were sitting there in places I had already looked during the day. And once the black light hit them, there they were. So if you grow tomatoes and hornworms are a problem where you live, and where aren't they, I really like having one of those flashlights around. I'll put an Amazon link down in the description. But go out after dark when it's actually dark and slowly scan the plants. Don't just wave it around from 6 feet away. Get close in there, scan the tops and bottoms of the leaves, look along the stems, look toward the center of the plant. And when something lights up, take a closer look. Kids absolutely love this. If you want to get kids out in the garden, this is the way to do it. If you have chickens, they love them. To be honest, I had too many to pick off, so I was impatient and I just got the scissors out and started guillotining them. But I had another problem. We were about to leave town for a week and a half. Normally, if you can stay on top of a pest by walking through the garden and physically removing it, I really like doing that. It's simple. I'm not spraying something just because I can. But we were getting ready to go on vacation, and I had already learned something important. I could pick off a whole bunch of hornworms and still miss some. And I wasn't going to be here every evening with a flashlight checking these plants. And I really didn't want to come home and find that hornworms had stripped every single plant. So I decided this was a situation where BT made sense. BT is short for Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a mouthful. This is something that takes care of any type of caterpillar. So you do need to be a little careful if you're growing milkweed or fennel or dill or things that you know that butterflies are attracted to, because it'll kill their caterpillars as well. So I never go spraying anything indiscriminately. This goes on my tomatoes and that's it. And the important thing to understand about BT is that it is not something where you spray a giant caterpillar and it instantly drops dead. The caterpillar has to eat the treated plant material. Once it consumes the BT, it stops feeding and eventually dies. This is harmless to humans and any other non-caterpillar type species. And BT tends to be most useful when caterpillars are still small. So if I've got one giant hornworm sitting right in front of me, I'm just picking it off. I'm not going to waste time spraying the hornworm that's already in my hand. What I wanted BT to help me with were the caterpillars I hadn't found yet, especially the smaller ones that could keep feeding while we were gone, or the eggs that had not yet hatched yet. As always, follow the label on the specific product you're using. Now, I mix in at the same time some Neptune's Harvest tomato and veg or their fish and seaweed formula. This is a great time, since you're already wetting the leaves, to make sure you're foliar feeding at the same time. Coverage matters because the caterpillar has to consume treated foliage. So make sure the entire plant is soaked. And depending on the product and conditions, reapplication can be necessary. So this is one of those situations where the label is your friend. Now for me, the timing of this mattered. We were leaving. I knew there were possibly more caterpillars than I could probably find. I also knew there could be unhatched eggs still in the plants. So I treated the plants with BT, we went away. And when we came back, the hornworm problem was gone, and they have not come back. And that spraying was done about a month ago. And now, instead of showing you plants that are actively being eaten, I can show you something else. So this is the part I really want you to see if you've just discovered you have hornworms and you're looking at your tomato plants and thinking it's ruined. Look at this. Here is the old damage down here. You can see where the foliage was completely stripped, but look at all this new growth. Once I got the hornworms under control, the plants just started recovering. Tomatoes are vigorous plants. Obviously, how well a plant recovers depends on how much damage was done, how healthy the plant was to begin with, and the weather. But don't look at a few stripped leaves or branches and automatically assume the plant is finished. Stop the damage, then give the plant a chance. Now, seeing all the growth that these have put on, as much eating as there was done on the leaves a little further down on the plant, it's really nothing at this point. Now let's talk about the part of the story that I find really interesting, the basil. I have companion planted basil with my tomatoes for years, a lot of basil. And for probably 7 years, I've sworn by it. During that time, I haven't had any hornworms where I had basil. And then this year, my basil got started late. It was here, but it wasn't big enough yet to create the kind of planting I normally have around these tomatoes. You can see there's just as much basil here. Some of it's been cut back for pesto last night. There's just as much basil almost as there are tomatoes. I think that's the magic of it. You don't just put one or two plants, you flood your tomato bed with basil along the front, the sunny side. And of course, this year, the basil was late. It was maybe a tenth of the size that it is now, just a month ago when all this happened. And I got the hornworm infestation. Now, I want to be very clear about this. I cannot sit here and tell you that I conducted a controlled experiment and proved that the late basil caused my hornworm outbreak. Don't know. There are a lot of variables in a garden from year to year. However, I do have my past 7 years. I also have hundreds of you, possibly thousands of you, who have told me that this has worked for you. Have I gotten comments from people who say it hasn't? Of course. Again, there are variables in every garden. But I can tell you right now, I will never plant my basil late again, and I will never plant my tomatoes without a hedge of basil around them. And the reason basil works is there's nothing magic about it. It is strongly scented. In fact, sitting right here, I can smell the basil plants versus the tomato plants. And that's the same thing that happens with the moth. It finds tomatoes through scent. And if you've got something strong, it doesn't have to be basil. It can be something like marigolds or anything that smells strongly that will cover up the smell of the tomatoes. That's what does it. Now, one of the benefits of having a diverse garden is you're not only thinking about repelling pests. You're also thinking about supporting the insects that eat or parasitize those pests. And hornworms have a really interesting natural enemy. You may have seen pictures of a hornworm covered in what looks like tiny white grains of rice. If you see one, do not kill that hornworm. Those little white things are cocoons from parasitic wasps. The parasitic wasp lays eggs inside the hornworm, and then they emerge and go into this cocoon where they will then become more wasps. Now, these aren't scary wasps. These are very tiny wasps that don't hurt humans, but they are parasitic to the hornworm. The hornworm will die once it has fed all these baby wasps. So leave that hornworm alone because nature is already handling it. So to attract more of those beneficial wasps, plant flowers in your vegetable garden, especially flowers that look like umbrellas, that have a wide base of pollen, like daisies, zinnias. They love dill flower, carrot flower. Keep your garden diverse when it comes to plants. Definitely add flowers, because you're going to bring in not only beneficial insects for the tomato worm, but pretty much for every other pest you have as well. But you're also keeping an eye on your plants, because companion planting doesn't replace paying attention. I learned that this year. Now, this might bring us to another question. How did all these giant caterpillars suddenly show up? They didn't actually show up giant. Hornworms are the caterpillar stage of the sphinx moth, sometimes called hawk moths. The adult moth lays eggs on suitable host plants. Those eggs hatch, and the caterpillars start small. Very small compared to what they eventually become. That's part of why the infestation can seem like it came out of nowhere. And usually it does seem that way because most of the time the moths are active at night. However, I do think I got a little heads up on this because the way I have the shade cloth all the way around the tomatoes, I went out one morning and the hawk moth was still in there. It was kind of confused and not sure how to get out of the netting or the shade cloth. And it was probably flying around in there all night long, laying eggs. So when I saw it, of course, I killed it, but I knew what it was, and I knew to be on the lookout within the next few days to see something. And they got away from me for a little while because I wasn't paying super close attention. And again, the destruction can happen overnight, especially when they start getting big. So if you walked outside today and found your tomato plant looking like this, here's exactly what I would do. First, don't panic. Look for the freshest damage, find the stems that have just been stripped, then look for the hornworm poop on the leaves and the ground underneath. Once you find that, search directly above it. Look underneath leaves, look along stems, look inside the plant. Pick off every hornworm you can find. Come back after dark with a UV flashlight and scan the plants again. You may be shocked, as I was, by how many you walked right past. If you only have a few, keep hand picking. If you've got a more significant infestation or lots of young caterpillars, BT is an option. Follow the label on whatever product you're using, and if you ever find that hornworm covered in white parasitic wasp cocoons, leave that one alone. It's already being taken care of. I was really frustrated when this happened because I've grown tomatoes for years without dealing with hornworms on this scale or hardly at all. And they did a lot of damage. But there are two things that I want you to take away from this. First, hornworms look terrifying and they can eat an unbelievable amount of foliage. But once you know they're there, they're actually pretty manageable. You can physically remove them, find them at night with the flashlight. You have BT if you need another level of control, and you have beneficial insects out there helping you too. And second, don't give up on your tomato plants because they got stripped. I mean, look at these plants now. This is all new growth after I got the hornworms under control. And next year, my basil is getting a much earlier start, I can tell you that much. If you guys want to know other companion plants for tomatoes, just take a look at this video right here, or grab my book. I'll leave a link in the description, Companion Planting for Beginners, and I will see you guys next time.